Hey everyone, thank you for joining. I'm Martin Kessler. I'm co-founder and CEO of ShapeScale. And I'd say I'm most and foremost an entrepreneur, but I'm also a health and fitness enthusiast. My background is really in marketing and sales, but also in data analytics. And I've also played a huge role in the conception of both the Shape and the Health Score. And I'm also a certified sports nutritionist. Now, today's webinar is what we call a ShapeScale Masterclass, which is really great for any existing customers or also those that want to learn more about our product ShapeScale. And it's really going to be about the topic of the Shape Score and the Health Score, which we have recently completely overhauled. It's version 2.0, and that has come with a lot of new improvements, as well as to our new PDF reports, which I'm also going to talk about. And in this webinar, I'm really going to explain what the scores are and how they can be used in a professional setting to assess client baseline and progress measurements to really see how your clients are doing in terms of their physical health, fitness, and also appearance. Now a lot of you are already existing customers and now all about ShapeScale. But for those who are kind of new to what ShapeScale is, let me just give you a brief 60-second overview. Essentially, ShapeScale is the only fully integrated 3D body scanner that is able to capture photorealistic, high-precision body scans. It captures a scan in just under a minute. And our design has also received multiple patents by now, as well as most recently, actually, 2 product design awards, namely the Good Design and Red Dot Design Award, which are really some of the most prestigious design awards in our industry. Now, in terms of what ShapeScale can really do for you, of course, it doesn't just give you that photorealistic 3D avatar. It also gives you a lot of measurements, starting from DEXA-like accuracy for body composition, from body fat to visceral fat to lean muscle mass. And we do that at a great accuracy of 95 to 97% compared to a DEXA scanner. And beyond that, we also provide you with regional measurements of your clients, such as automated circumference measurements like waist circumference and hip circumference, all the way to also segmented body volume, how much volume a client has, for example, in their midsection or in their butt or in their arms and legs, which can be also really useful for more tailor-made training programs. Now, in terms of today's masterclass, we're going to go over a number of things, such as what are the scores, just to give you a brief overview. What is the Shape Score? What is the Health Score? And then also what we have exactly changed and how that looks like in practice. And then, of course, how you can actually use it with your clients to assess where they're at and how they've been progressing. And beyond that, I'm also going to talk, like I mentioned, about some of the changes that have come around when it comes to our PDF reports, which are, of course, really nice for clients to give them a brief overview of all their measurements and progress. But then I'm also going to tell you about what's next in our pipeline, because we do have quite a few exciting new updates in the pipeline. Finally, just a little bit of housekeeping, just so you're aware, we do have that little Q&A button in the Zoom interface, and that will allow you to submit questions throughout the webinar. And at the end of the session, we're still going to go over hopefully most of your questions. My colleague Lila here will help field all of the questions, and hopefully we will be able to get them all answered. But do take the time and submit them in advance. That will help us really to go through them in an ordered manner. All right, without further ado, let's talk about the Shape Scores. And just to give you, some feedback maybe from some of our customers, what they have said in the past. So, this customer, for instance, has said that people get really excited, when they see their health and shape score and how it's been improving. Then someone else has also said that it's really motivational, and it gives you, when you don't hit really those great marks and those great scores, and then you try to beat it to really become a better version of yourself. And that's really, I would say, the core philosophy behind our product as well, not just to know yourself, but also to become a better version of yourself. Yeah, and then of course, that score, sometimes can also be higher than what you think. And that can also be helpful, because a lot of times when you have clients, and they go through a weight loss journey, they don't necessarily see the changes, especially if you incorporate resistance training. They may get actually some additional lean muscle mass, and then they see themselves, of course, every day in the mirror, and they don't really see any changes. And that's really where ShapeScale comes in, not just through the photorealistic visual that you can line up then in a 3D before and after view, but also through the score, which is kind of helping you to affirm, okay, are you on track? Are you actually moving in a healthier direction? And that's really what the scores are all about. But before we get started, I want to hear from all of you in a quick poll. Let me actually launch that regarding how many of you are already using the shape score or the health score, and how many of you are actually aware that we have pushed an update about 2 weeks ago. I'm going to let it run for another 20 seconds. Amazing. Thank you for participating. It is quite telling that the majority, 70% of you, have not actually been aware that there has been an update, which is great, because that's really what the webinar is about. But it's also telling us, hey, maybe we need to send you more than one email to update you about some recent changes. And it's also great to see, like that a lot of you still are, looking to learn more about the shape score and the health score and what they're all about, because in the end, it should really be another tool in your tool set as a practitioner to help your clients get in a better shape, and to also make your job a little bit easier, because that's really why we have come up with the whole concept of the shape and health score. So let me move on to that, because next we're going to actually talk a bit why the scores. And the scores really came about 2 years ago when ShapeScale was still in beta. And initially we were testing with a lot of end users, and then eventually also with practitioners like yourself. And what happened is that we had a lot of measurements, like from all the circumference to all the volume measurements to, the body composition measurements. And a lot of times we got asked the questions, okay, I have all of these measurements, but what does it really mean, And when they're changing, some of them may be changing in one direction, some of them may be moving in the other direction. And sure, yeah, a lot of you are health professionals. You have that background, and you can really, dig through all the numbers and make sense of it all. But not everyone really has the time, right? Like every minute kind of counts to really understand, how is my client moving, and in what direction are they moving, what's happening. And that's really what the scores, what really originated the idea of the shape and the health score. Now, of course, scores have been around for some time, and it's needless to say that we've been inspired by a great many of them, such as the Apple Fitness rings, which are a great motivator to, get those steps in, get those active minutes in, to really close those rings every day. The Whoop, which is like this activity tracker or recovery band, is really great at, telling you how exerted you have been throughout the day. And then at the end, you can also tell, okay, once you wake up in the morning, how recovered am I? And it's, of course, taking a lot of metrics into the equation, from, your resting heart rate to your heart rate variability to how active or strenuous, your previous day had been. And of course, again, that's a lot of numbers to dig through. And what the Whoop here has done is really to give you a single metric to focus on. And that kind of gives you a quick idea, okay, this is how recovered I am. this is how active I can be in today's day when it comes to, strenuous exercise. And similar to the Oura, they give you also readiness scores, so similar kind of concept. And that really inspired us to think about, okay, what can we actually do when it comes to a scoring system? And when you think about it, body composition analysis typically throws a lot of numbers at you. And I would say the score was really, the idea behind the score was to make it easier to understand. So that was one idea, to give you quick, actionable insights in a 0 to 100 score. Am I getting in a better shape, or am I getting in a worse shape? And to give you also like that holistic view, right? Because a lot of numbers are often changing. Often you look at just one metric like BMI or body fat percentage to assess client progress, but that doesn't really tell you the whole story, right? It doesn't really look at things like symmetry. It doesn't look at things like muscle. And that's really what inspired us to think about something different that is really taking into equation all the different metrics that we have to give you a more comprehensive overview. And then take all of that and then also highlight the most important changes. So that was another idea, to allow you to easily pinpoint, where exactly you have been improved or gotten worse, and what you should be actually focused on to work on. Oops, sorry, I went backwards. And then finally, the idea was also to create something that's a little bit more motivational, in a sense where we've seen, the scores actually generate a strong sense of achievement. If you have, moved up in the score, that's, evoking a lot of positive feelings. And then also it allows for some element of gamification, I'd call it, because it kind of allows you to, start to do things like transformation challenges, with like multiple clients. We've seen like some fitness studios do that with their clients, like where they host a challenge over 12 weeks and the scores really allow it to make it a bit more comparable, like the change, as, compared to just looking at, a metric of how many pounds a client may have lost, which can really not be a good thing, right? Like if you lose a lot of lean muscle mass in a progress, then it's not actually that great that you lost 20% of your weight. Sometimes it's actually better to lose less weight because you have actually gained more lean mass and lost mostly body fat. And that's really what all goes into the scores in the end. So what is really the shape score? So if you look here at that left picture, it's a top level metric that gives you kind of an understanding, if you're on a very low, very high, or in a median kind of field, and then it breaks it down into different subcomponents. Oops, sorry, I went back again. Really have to be careful in what direction I'm clicking here. All right, so yeah, it breaks it down basically in different components, and it allows you to analyze in the end body composition as in leanness, but then also it breaks it down into upper and lower body fitness. And also it looks at body shape changes and proportions and how they have changed. And then it really identifies areas, okay, this is really where you have achieved the most change. And those are also areas to focus on, because here then in those factors, you kind of see, okay, if I really wanted to be at 100, well, I'm pretty much at the max right now when it comes to my upper body fitness. And there's really just maybe 1 point to add for curviness, another point for lower body fitness. And then it's really mostly the leanness where I can make improvements. Now, for men, we have 4 factors, one being the leanness, another being the upper body fitness, another being the lower body fitness, and then balance, as in upper body to lower body balance, how well proportioned the body is. And if I can break it down, the shape score is really the idea of giving you a 0 to 100 score of what's your best possible body shape when it comes to physical health, physical fitness, and also appearance. And that's really where the proportions also play a factor, but also proportions are really important when it comes to health, of course, right? You don't want to be imbalanced between, left and right leg. You don't want to be too top heavy compared to lower body heavy. So that's really what the ShapeScale also keeps a look at. And then for women, we also, of course, look at leanness. That's one big factor. Curviness as expressed mostly through waist to hip ratio. And that kind of allows you to understand, okay, do you have that hourglass type of figure? Of course, we're not looking right now into chest because that's much more difficult to train. I know some of our aesthetic clients have asked for it, but there's been, we don't necessarily want to encourage surgical interventions. So that's why we're not factoring in the chest right now for women when it comes to curviness, but mostly the butt compared to the waist. And then, of course, we're also looking at upper body fitness and lower body fitness. And just to give you some examples, so besides body composition, we're also looking at ratios. For men, we're looking at the shoulder to waist ratio, which is really giving you an idea. Do you have that V-tapered figure, which is really, of course, representative of having, some upper body muscularity compared to having a relatively lean waistline. So that's kind of dependent on shoulder compared to waist circumference. And then we're also looking at things like waist to height ratio, which is a great metric actually to keep track of what is your waist circumference compared to your height. So it's kind of height independent that way. And it really gives us an easy way to track really how large you are for your individual size. Oops, went back again. And then for women, like I mentioned, we're looking at waist to hip ratio. And also, to give you another example, thigh to waist ratio, which is really giving you, again, an idea of the size and proportions of one's upper legs compared to independent basically to their waist. And that, again, is a proportional thing. And we do have quite a few of those ratios. I'm not going to list all of them, but they are all in the app as well, visible. Now, if I sum that up, ShapeScale does give you multiple dimensions for each score criteria. Like I mentioned, we have those 4 different factors. We break then down those factors into a body map, which you can find when you scroll a bit further down below. And that body map really gives you a map, really. It's almost like a treasure map. Okay, this is where you're at right now. And you see those color graded areas right here. So that's for the shape score for a man. And you can see the torso right now is relatively yellow. Shoulders are also relatively yellow, whereas his lower body is mostly green, as well as his biceps and neck, meaning that those areas are already in an excellent range. So those are areas that you don't really have to work a lot on. What this particular client here would have to work on is really his body fat. It's still on the higher side. He has a body fat percentage of 22.8%, which is still a fair bit higher than what we would consider the ideal based on research, which is for men 5 to 13%. And then, of course, there's still like upper body fitness that needs some improvement. And that's kind of allowing you to identify, okay, those are like some areas to work on. And then you can break it down further. You can jump into each individual metric. So I can tap on body fat in this example on the second screen, and that will bring me to this third screen right here. And that will give you an idea, okay, what's actually been changing around my body fat. So this client is actually doing quite well already. You can see he has lost 7% in body fat over the last couple months. You can pull up graphs. You can change it from a 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year view. And you can kind of see then all the measurements in that given time range. And then we also break it down to, okay, those would be different ranges that fall into the ideal range. So there we have 13 to 70%. It's very lean. That would be ideal, as well as 17 to 23%. Now, what has actually changed? The previous score gave you a body map that was deemed really as judgmental because the way we presented it was we were giving you individual measurements, and those were individualized to a person's body shape and height. And then we broke them down into very large to very slim, or sometimes very small to very large. And those were really deemed somewhat judgmental when you see them, especially for the first time. And they weren't really meant to be judgmental. They were more meant as, kind of giving an idea, okay, this is where you fall. Now, if you move into your ideal directions to get towards a 100 shape score, you would either have to go directionally into a larger direction or in a slimmer or smaller direction. Now, we understand this was too prescriptive, which is why we have been moving away from that. I'm going to show you exactly how that has changed. And we also have removed a lot of the subjective terminology, like to call out certain body features as perfect or acceptable, which are, often deemed offensive as well. Another thing that we've done is we have really overhauled some of the scoring that is done behind the scenes, and some of it was a little bit too harsh for when it came to men, for biceps and hips, and then for women also around their body fat, which was actually a little bit too low for what is actually ideal, because women should have a fair bit more in body fat compared to men. And then, it was also a little bit difficult to interpret. Now, fast forward, ShapeScale 2.0. So one thing that we have changed is really the language. Like I mentioned before, it was a little bit judgmental. So now we have much more objective and health-focused categories, which really were shaped by the feedback of our customers over the last 18 months. So do give it a look. And if you still find qualms with it, do let us know. We're always like to hear from our customers directly of, what they perceive the shortcomings of our products to be. And then that really helps us shape our product roadmap as well. Now, the target ranges, those we have completely overhauled. I was showing you earlier, we were giving you absolute statements, you have a waist of 35 inches and you should have a waist of 32 inches. Well, now we have changed a fair bit of that, what it means in terms of all the different ranges. We're not telling you if you're at a very high range, you have to have a 44, 46 inches. We've been really moving to the ratio system. I'm going to show you that in a few, but that is really allowing you to really see where you fall in terms of the ratio. Now, in terms of the body proportions, that brings me really to this screen. We've really broken it down more, like where you fall in terms of the ratio. And that gives you really a clearer insight how we evaluate the body proportions. Because often, when you look at two measurements, you really can't just break them apart, right? Like when I look at shoulder to waist ratio, for example, there's the relationship between how wide my shoulders are compared to how narrow my waist is, right? But let's say I can move in two directions here, right? Like I can either work on my shoulders getting wider, or I can work on my waist getting narrower, and both will have a positive impact on my shoulder to waist ratio. Now, by actually allowing you to see what your calculated shoulder to waist ratio is, you will also have a much better idea what metrics you should actually be focused on, as opposed to just giving you a directional answer. Okay, your shoulders have to be 42 inches and your waist needs to be 30 inches. Because depending on your body type, it may mean a different number. And that's really something that we keep at your own discretion. Now, we've also significantly expanded the Learn More section to really provide you a deeper understanding of all the ranges and proportions used in the ShapeScale. So do give those a look. That enhanced guidance really explains why each really matters in terms of fitness and aesthetics and health, which hopefully then in the end also allow you to interpret your results better and to take actionable steps towards an improved body shape. I'll give you an example. Here we have a subject who, let's see the score, sorry. He had an old score of 88, and the new score now is 100. So what we've really changed now, initially we had a ratio between the comparison of biceps and calves. And now what we've changed is to really just compare biceps with thighs, and that makes it a much more anatomically relevant in terms of the measurements. And it doesn't really penalize people with larger arms and smaller legs. And then we've also improved the biceps to waist ratio. So that requirement has become more realistic. So now you only require much smaller arms, around 14.5 inches for a 32-inch waistline. That already allows you to score in an excellent point range instead of having like 17 inches in terms of arm circumference, which was almost impossible to achieve in the previous version. Now, we've also added a greater emphasis on the V taper. So that allowed this client to achieve a higher scoring in that regard, because again, you don't really need to have much of a wider V taper than this. So we made it a little bit more achievable on that end. So now it's really the most important factor. It's factoring 30% of the entire score, really reinforcing the classic V shape as the aesthetic and fitness ideal for male physiques. And we've also created a narrower preference for the waist. So the waist to hip ratio now favors a more pronounced taper below a 0.8 ratio, rewarding a more defined waistline compared to hip circumference. And yeah, overall, the body type scoring is much more friendly. The new system respects natural body proportions better and allows users to focus on a more balanced development without really fighting, I'd say, like their own genetic predispositions, which can then, of course, result in client dissatisfaction. And moving forward to the female example. So there, yeah, we had a big change in terms of the body fat standards from which initially were very low at just 10 to 13%. And we also allowed for a greater diversity among different body types. And we moved a lot of the ratios from a height-centric measurement to a more waist-centric measurement. So most of the ratios are more waist-dependent as opposed to height-dependent, which also allow for a better hourglass recognition. So if you compare this one, she had an 87 score, and now she has a 94 shape score. And all of that really makes the scores much more attainable while also maintaining higher standards. So muscular women are no longer penalized, and the waist-centric measurements, they also allow for more proportional comparisons for the female physique. And also by shifting from the thigh to waist ratio instead of thigh to height, this really allowed the system to better reward and recognize the hourglass figure. Now, moving on to the health score. The health score was really the idea to provide you with a measurement from 0 to 100 of what's one's best body health, I would say, and there we wanted to create something that was a better indicator for health compared to BMI. And what we have done here is we've initially taken research from the NIH that looked at 2 decades of longevity data that was comparing body shape data with that of all-cause mortality risk, so anything that can kill you, from heart disease to diabetes to cancer, et cetera, et cetera. Now, of course, there can be another disease risk where you may be genetically predisposed, you might be a chain smoker, you may be an alcoholic. There are a lot of different factors that go into one's overall health risk, right? However, body shape and body composition can be a huge factor when it comes to cardiometabolic risk factors. And that's really what we wanted to create with the health score. Now, initially, it was based mostly on the APSI, which is the A body shape index. And that was really a measurement that took into the equation things like weight. It was height independent, sort of like BMI, but then it also factored in waist circumference. And researchers have really found a much greater correlation with all-cause mortality risk with the APSI compared to the BMI, which is why we've chosen it as our core metric for the health score initially in its first iteration. Now, that led to a few issues because it really had an over-reliance on the waistline, and that led to sometimes limited metabolic health indicators because it didn't really look at, visceral fat. It didn't look at muscularity as much. And that led to some outliers. We've seen that especially with larger clients that had a large waistline, but also a larger amount of weight. And that sometimes led to a high health score, which then, of course, didn't really quite look accurate. And that created a lot of distrust. And I'd say the health score, the APSI worked great on a population-wide level for those population-wide studies by researchers, but it sometimes had poor results for individual level results. And that really led us to really rethink our approach to the health score, and it led to a more comprehensive health score 2.0, which takes into consideration things like visceral fat, because visceral fat, of course, is really the most important fat when it comes to your own health, right? Because it's really the fat that we have around organ tissue. And that is really the fat that most health researchers consider as harmful to our overall health, whereas other subcutaneous fat may not be as harmful compared to visceral fat. So that's why the visceral fat is now a large component of our new health score. We're also looking at a new metric, which we call the body age, which is something that we've created that is basically based on standardized measurements of your whole body and how that compares to the median age. And it gives you kind of an idea, okay, how do my measurements individual to me compare to, the median 18-year or 22-year-old? And based on that, it gives you an idea how old your body is. So that's another factor. And then we also look at lean mass, of course, which is really important when it comes to bone density, functional strength, and also, avoiding then in the end, your risk of bone fractures from a fall, especially in later age. And I really like to think of lean mass as something like a savings account, right? You really want to maintain as much you can and ideally gain and add to your lean mass at a young or middle age, because it becomes very, very difficult to add new lean mass when you reach, an age of 50 or 60 beyond. So that's an important factor that now goes into our health score. And now if we look at the previous health score, so as we mentioned, it was heavily focused on the waistline, and that really tended to overscore people that had a narrow waist in relation to their hips. And like you can see in this picture here, both users were relatively healthy, but you can see that the previous score really penalized users with a less pronounced waistline, like the one here on the left. So she only had a health score of 81 compared to the right one, which had a health score of 100. And that might be for some, genetic predisposition, but nevertheless, that penalized this woman here on the left. And that, of course, was unrealistic and unfair to have a lower health score compared to the woman here on the right. So again, this health score was a little bit over-reliant on the waistline, which led to some false positives, I'd call them. And then if we look at how now the health score 2.0 scores these two women. We can see the one here on the right that had 37% body fat. She still had excellent visceral fat, mind you, so that's why her score is still fairly excellent, but she does have a little bit of a too high body fat percentage of nearly 38%, which is why she only scores 5 out of 20 for her body fat. Whereas all the other metrics are really great, right? Like you can see, she's definitely of a more muscular build. Her visceral fat is excellent. And then her body age is also excellent. And that's why now she has an 86 health score. And if we look now on the left-hand side, you see she has a 96 health score. And most of the metrics there are really great. The only area that you can already suspect, right? Like she could add a little bit more on the muscularity. She does like a bit on the functional muscle side there. She could really still gain another 4 points. So if I was her, practitioner, I would really recommend to add a little bit more resistance training and add to her protein to her diet, so she could make some gains in that realm, and that would help her to still improve her body health somewhat more. Now, if I can recap, so from the initial scan and the interpretation of the baseline measurements of your clients, the scores are really there to allow you to establish how healthy they are in terms of their body shape and composition, and whether they are healthy or not healthy. So really great for that initial consultation to establish baseline metrics and to identify then priority areas, what to focus on in terms of further improvements. What are the lower hanging fruits when I look at the factors, right? Like I have a client of a shape score of 60. Well, is it really the leanness that a client is lacking, or are they lacking functional strength? Are they maybe imbalanced? Typically, for most clients, it starts really with the leanness, and that's something that we would recommend to focus on. Nevertheless, even with additional resistance training, that allows you to still maintain often, metrics around functional strength, which is of course also really important. And then once you have a client that maybe hits like a, shape score of 80 and beyond, that's really when they typically tend to be already in a much better shape and leanness is less of a factor. So that's where really can even add a bit more resistance training to really focus on some of those problem zones to really improve on those and balancing issues as well. And finally, then, of course, they allow you to really track improvements, and you can really see then, okay, is my client's leanness improving? Are they still maintaining, their fitness level, or is it maybe declining faster than it should? And that's really where the shape score will give you a differentiation. If you just imagine you have a client that lost, 20% of their weight, they may actually end up with they may still improve their shape score, mind you, right? Because they probably lost a lot of body fat and they probably had a lot of body fat to lose. So their shape score will probably still have improved. But you may have another client that only lost 10% of their body weight and they will have a better shape score improvement. And that's simply because that weight change is actually the result of losing mostly body fat and retaining lean muscle mass. And that will lead to a better shape score improvement. So that's really like how you should imagine the shape score can add a lot of value then when assessing improvements across multiple dimensions of your client. Now, if we move on to the PDF reports, that is another key feature that we have changed, as I mentioned, right? So one thing that we have completely improved based on your feedback is to make it much more print friendly. So a lot of you had mentioned that the initial version, the numbers were too small when you printed it on letter size. So we really cranked up the size of the fonts and also some of the images to make it a lot more palatable when you actually print it out. And we've, of course, added a lot of the new metrics that we have added in the last quarter in Q4, such as the visceral fat, the lean mass, and the basal metabolic rate. And we've also expanded on the heat map visualization And we've revamped the body map and measurement display. And we've now also fully integrated the new ShapeScore 2.0 and the Health Score 2.0. And we've also improved the progress graphs of the PDF reports and added more detailed explanations around the score inside of the reports. So here we see the improvements to the graphs. So you have more graphs now in the PDF view. You have better tables now, better comparison side-by-side views, the improved heat map. And then in terms of what's next, well, we still know there are always improvements that we would like to take when it comes to our body composition algorithm. So we still have improvements that we're currently testing internally in our staging environment around the body fat algorithm. So that's going to improve accuracy around some edge groups, like people that are very muscular or very obese. So that is an update that will be pushed very soon, probably next month. And then we're also rolling out a new metric. So that's been in the works for a long time, appendicular lean mass, which I'm personally a big fan of, because it's really just a lean mass that you find in your arms and legs. So it's independent of the lean mass stored in one's torso. And if I can just explain what we consider lean mass. So lean mass is basically total weight, less bone mass, less body fat mass. So that includes the weight of skin tissue, that includes the weight of muscle, that includes the weight of organ tissue, that includes water weight, right? So includes a lot of different components, right? And lean mass on its own can already be a great indicator in the long term when it comes to muscularity, because what's typically changing, right? Like if I look at my client progress over 3 months, if they have shifted 5-10 pounds in lean mass, it's not their bones that are suddenly growing huge. It's not like that they suddenly store a lot more water, right? So it's not like that they suddenly have a lot more skin or organ tissue, right? Those stay relatively constant. What tends to change is really the muscle mass. And that's why lean mass is such a great metric to keep track of muscularity of a client over time. But appendicular lean mass, ALM, is much more useful in the short term, because now we're just looking at the lean mass of arms and legs. And that's really representative of 60 to 70% of total muscle mass. So now we're not looking at, again, the lean mass of my torso, so all the organ tissue, all the water that is typically stored in one's torso. And that can fluctuate in the short term, right? Like, I mean, if I drink 5 cups of water, it will shift, by, easily 2.5 pounds. And that's about as much as I can gain in terms of muscles in a given month. So that's where, in a 4-week time window, lean mass can sometimes fluctuate too much to get a good feel of, is my client's muscularity really increasing or decreasing? Now with appendicular lean mass, that's much less prone to those changes, because now we're not really factoring in a lot of water, right? Because we don't really have a lot of water stored in our arms and legs. And that's really why ALM is really the gold standard when it comes to assessing muscularity of a patient, and why it's the gold standard assessment of certain muscle conditions like sarcopenia. And that's why I'm a big fan of the introduction of that metric, and it will allow you to keep track of your client progression in a much better way. And another thing that has been highly requested is the fat mass. Now that's an easy one. We kind of already have it, but right now we only show you the body fat percentage. But it is, of course, really important to understand weight changes, right? So if you imagine your client lost 5 pounds of weight, well, how's that weight change, composed of? Has my client lost 3 pounds of body fat and then 2 pounds of lean mass, or maybe have they lost 7 pounds of body fat and gained 2 pounds of lean mass? That's of course really important to understand. And right now, a lot of our clients had to do those calculations manually, and of course that adds to your time spent, which is relatively needless, of course, if we could just show you that metric. So that's going to be included in our next update next month, and that should hopefully make your job also a whole lot easier. And then we will also push some usability improvements. We're always looking to improve the user experience and to make things a little bit easier to find inside of the app. And we're also looking at enhancing the first scan experience to really distill even a bit more of what you can learn from a first scan, because that's really the first time you get really exposed to our product. And we feel a lot of value right now is being generated from having a progress scan, where you can then really see how some of those metrics have changed. But there's already a lot that you can learn from those initial metrics. And for that, we are going to push a rather large update, which we call the Insight Lens. And it's going to really pinpoint some of the key details that are interesting around that first body scan. So that's actually a feature I'm very excited about as well. Now, if you're a prospective customer of ours and you want to learn more about the product, feel free to head to business.shapescale.com. You can also go to business.shapescale.com/demo to then book a demo with me, and then I can give you a bit more of an in-depth overview of all the different features that ShapeScale has to offer beyond just the health and the shape score. All right, now I've done a lot of talking. I'd like to hear your questions, and I'm gonna have my colleague Leela here field some of them, and hopefully we will have time to go through all of them. We have about 10 minutes.
All right, so the first question is, do clients download the app and track their own progress? Can we see the progress as well? Not sure how to have it where clients see their progress on their own devices as well as our clinic.
Yeah, so that's actually fairly easy. So we do give you that option. So each business user has access to all their client data using a client dashboard. So that's like a single list of all your clients in one single view. And there, then you have the choice. Okay, I can create my client account directly, meaning that I type in like their name, their email, their height, yada, yada, and then their account is set up to take new scans. But at that point, I also have the option to then share that account access with them. And that means they will receive an email from us asking them to download the app and to set up an account. And once they've done so, they will also have access to their own individual data. And I should say most clinics choose to do that for the very reason that it's much more engaging and motivating to have access to all of that data. But I would still recommend to take a bit that time, on site to go over client results. And most practitioners do that, using like an iPad device, for example, or by printing out the PDF report, which can also be nice because then you can annotate results. Yeah, and but you don't have to. So if you prefer to be that your method of getting clients back to your business, we've seen others do that as well. We've also seen some, of our customers charge for access to the app. I mean, that's maybe another modality that can drive ROI to your business.
Yeah, so and then on the flip side, someone was asking, as the admin, what are the permissions options for my clients that have Android or prefer not to download the app for a scan? Is the system set up for admin manual entry for clients?
Yeah, it's exactly what I mentioned, right? Like you can create accounts of your clients from within the app, and then your client doesn't have to do anything. That was really based on a lot of the feedback that we've received from our customers to really streamline client onboarding, to really make it seamless. Because you don't want your clients to fiddle around setting up an app or, managing their login to take scans or to get even their first scan taken, right? You want to have that all already taken care of by, say, your nurse practitioner or member of staff.
All right, the next one, someone is asking, where do you find the body age?
Let me maybe share my screen of my phone. That's probably the best if I do that. Just give me 1 second here if I can find my phone. iPhone. All right, I hope you can see my screen. So here we're looking at the dashboard of, like I'm in a client view. that dashboard gives me really like all the top level metrics, right? Like I mentioned, the body map earlier, the health, and the shape score. Now, when it comes to body age, right, that's a factor within the health score. And you simply tap on health score, and that will bring up this screen. That's what we call the health score detail view, and that kind of gives you an idea of like the 4 different metrics: visceral fat, body age, functional muscle, body fat. You can see my client here has actually lost 20 points in their health score, and that's really because that client lost a bunch in body fat and muscle. Not really a great result. And I can then tap into body age down here, and then it will bring up the detailed view of that single metric. So now I can see, okay, body age has actually increased by 16 years. So initially that client had a body age of 18. Still in a very good range, mind you. That's really what you see here in that breakdown. And for some of the metrics, we also then have demographic info across those different metrics. But yeah, you have it basically broken down here below. So you have the visceral fat, that's still excellent. Body age, still good, but decreased. Functional muscle, that's decreased. Body fat, that's increased. That's why it's fair. And then you have the breakdown of the score ranges. So you can kind of see any client that is really over the median, like around 50, they tend to be already above average. That's kind of like the average we would see on the population scale level. And then as soon they're like over 60, that's when they start to be healthier than the average American. And then if they're like in the 90 to 100, that's really where there's very little room to optimize still in terms of health when it comes to your body shape and composition. And I hope that answered your question.
All right, next one is a pretty interesting one, actually. Have you considered including a risk factor questionnaire to assess social habits like smoking and alcohol consumption, sleep hours, and frequency and type of exercise? It would be helpful to show what the body could look like with changes in habits.
Oh yeah, that's a really great feature request. I mean, it's something that we are actively considering, to be transparent. It's not a planned feature as of yet, but one area that we're definitely excited about is by taking in more data, right? We already have Apple Health integration inside of the app, but we're not really doing a whole lot with it yet. What we want to do is we want to pull in more data, such as activity data, which then can also help form things like calculating not just the basal metabolic rate of a client, but also the total daily energy expenditure, which is really helpful for nutrition planning. But then it would be also really helpful to understand things like exercise, right? Like how does certain resistance training correspond with gains in certain body part groups or muscularity in general or body composition. And then honestly, smoking alcohol, that's not something that we have really looked into yet, but it could be an interesting factor as well. If you wanted to expand from the current body health score to something that's a little bit more all encompassing, right? Another thing that I would be interested in is pulling in things like a VO2 max, which is one of the best health indicators as well, beyond like the full blood panel and blood pressure measurements. But yeah, I don't expect that to launch this year. Still, that might be more for next year. This year, we're still more focused on bringing in a bit more, some of the features that I mentioned in the next quarter. But then beyond that, things like tighter integrations with EMRs, and then also some more intelligence. We're also looking at integrating more AI feedback that allow you to, create more coaching for your clients, and to make your job a little bit easier in that realm. But yeah, then the next step would be to add more metrics and more intelligence to that feature.
All right, next one. Do you push the update, or do we have to manually update our ShapeScale?
So the good news is you don't have to update your ShapeScale. There are 3 forms of updates we typically have. One is a device update. That rarely happens, maybe once a year at best. And when that happens, it happens automatically. So it will be as soon your scale is connected to Wi-Fi, it will push an update and it will give you the voice feedback that it's doing so. Now, most updates are either distributed in the background through our cloud system, and there you don't have to do anything. And then if it's user interface related, like the app, that is distributed all through the Apple App Store. Now, there's a setting inside of your iPhone or iPad that allows you to automatically update your apps. If you have checked that setting, it will already be updated. If you don't, then you have to go to the App Store and there's like an update section in there. And then you have to manually update the app. So I do recommend to check that inside of the App Store settings. One quick check could be just to go to the App Store, type in ShapeScale, which will bring up the app. And if it shows you an update button, that means you're not on the latest version and you have to manually push that update. But yeah, I do recommend everyone to just turn on automatic updates, and then you don't have to do anything.
All right, next one. Will the client be paying for the app or is it free to them?
Yeah, so it's completely free of charge. Now, we're not charging it. Like I mentioned, some of our customers choose to charge for it, but most of the time we do see best outcomes if it's all incorporated into a single program, because it allows you to keep your clients more motivated and engaged. And it will also allow them actually to then take screenshots, take screen recordings of their 3D before and after, and then share that to social media and also share with their progress and mention your business, which can of course also give you referral business later on.
All right. Can you use a computer or does the app only go on handheld device?
You can use a Mac computer to load the app. It's not necessarily the best experience because the app was really developed for iOS, meaning iPad OS and iPhone OS. But yeah, it is an option, but there's no web application as of now. Maybe that is something in the future we will offer to some extent, but it's also not easy because all the rendering happens on the device, and also a lot of the features are actually done locally on the device, so it's not easily translated to a web app without completely redesigning a lot of the functions. And beyond that, there will also be an Android app, but it's probably not going to be shipped before the end of the year. And that's for that very reason, right? Like a lot of the functions in the app need to be natively developed from scratch, and that requires a lot of time.
All right, then the next one. I have noticed that sometimes I do scan to clients whose weight is obese +2, but if it is fair and their health score is good, I'm kind of confused when I get to that part. Can you please explain?
Okay, fair point, and I can see where the confusion here arises. So if I just show you on my screen here, right, like that client that I was just looking at, I can also tap on any of those metrics like weight, body fat percentage, lean mass, BMI, visceral fat. Now, if I tap on weight, that will bring up body mass index ranges, BMI ranges, right? And just to be clear, there's no official obesity range for body fat percentage. That's why we only give it to you actually for BMI or weight. And here you can kind of see, okay, this client is in a normal BMI range. But if, like this person had a BMI over 30, that would put them in an obese class 1. If it's over 35, there would be an obese class 3. Now, that's purely based on weight. And you know how BMI goes? It may be complete BS, sorry, my language. That really depends on your client physiology, right? So, but we know it is still used in a lot of clinics. And, if you're prescribing GLP-1 meds, it is often a factor, right, that you have to have a BMI over 27, etc., to prescribe medication. And that's why we still have it in the app.
All right, then next one. I just received my ShapeScale, very excited. I'm about to fire it up next couple of days. Do you guys offer training videos I can share with my coaches to learn how to use it and read reports?
Yes, so we do have an on-demand training guide. So that's a series of small video clips that you can easily, share with all your coaches, and they can go through them. It's kind of having everything from, how to set up the device, which is fairly simple, to then also inviting clients and then managing those clients. And beyond that, you can also book a support call. So that allows you to schedule in advance a Zoom call with a member of our customer success team. And then that member can also give you some additional training to you on your team.
All right, and then last two questions. What are the customer support options if admins have issues with their device?
Yeah, so I mean, hopefully you never really have issues with your device, but if you do happen to have an issue, you can reach us right now at help@shapescale.com. That's our business priority support line. And we're working on basically getting you then an answer within 2 to 3 hours from there. It's not quite there yet, which is why we've just actually, I'm very happy to report that we've just brought on our first dedicated customer success manager to the team as of this Monday. We also have a text hotline that you can text your questions to. That's 415-991-7155. Again, 415-991-7155. There will also be phone support coming likely sometime next month, as soon that person that we've just hired is a little bit more up to speed. It's still going to take some time and training for that person to start taking phone calls, but it is something that's been highly requested, and we're looking at bringing that online as well.
Okay, then any other way to promote this service and any new marketing material to bring new customers?
I let Lila answer that.
Okay, so there is a new brochure coming. I just finished it this week, and we are gonna reach out to all of you guys, send you a link to Dropbox where you'll be able to download it, or we can also get it printed for you and ship it to you. And then there is one final question, a really quick one. Is there a way to turn off the scale without unplugging it?
Yes, there is. So you just have to fold down, collapse your ShapeScale arm. So you just push it down gently, and then it will go into standby mode. So there you don't have to unplug it. But there's really no harm in unplugging it. There's no issue if you unplug it. It's not like a hard drive or something. So you can also do that.
Okay, I think we can close it here with the questions.
Okay, yeah. I mean, we still see you have some more questions, but yeah, we're gonna reach out to you
I will
personally
be
to
reaching
answer some
out
of the
via
questions.
email,
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you so much for your time, and do let us know. Also, we're gonna send you still a survey with some additional questions. Like how you like the webinar, what types of webinars you would like to see in the future. Do let us know. We're always interested in hearing your feedback, because we're really working for you, the customer, to make this an awesome product and to help hopefully many people to get in a better shape. Thank you.